She had just saved my presentation, 22 slides, 6 weeks of preparation, one client meeting I could not afford to lose, and all she said afterward was, "Don't thank me. Just take me to dinner." Then she walked away. Down the corridor, past the coffee station, around the corner, gone, her floral notebook tucked under one arm, her cold coffee in her other hand, my thank you still sitting in my mouth, unused. We had been rivals for 18 months, competing for the same accounts, the same airtime in the same briefings, the same shortlist on every project that mattered. She was faster than me in rooms where speed counted. I was more thorough on paper over time. We had both understood this about each other, and never once said it aloud, because naming it would have changed what it was. Standing alone in that corridor, I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew I was going to do it anyway. My name is Adam Reeve. I'm 33. I'm a senior analyst at Mercer Consulting, which means I spend my working life inside other companies' problems, restructuring, operations, supply chain inefficiencies, and try to make them look solvable before they become crises. It is not the kind of work that makes for good dinner party conversation. It requires a specific tolerance for detail, a particular patience for people who have already decided what they think and need an analyst to confirm it, and a fairly high threshold for rooms that smell like recycled air and recently heated sandwiches. I live alone in a flat I keep meaning to furnish properly. I run in the mornings, not because I enjoy it, but because it is the only hour of the day where no one can ask me anything. My sister describes me as very good at being useful and very bad at being present, which I think is accurate and have chosen not to examine too carefully. I was not looking for anything. I was not closed to it. I was simply too occupied to notice the gap. Her name was Lena Park. She was 31. She had been a senior analyst at Mercer for 2 years to my 18 months, which gave her a fraction more standing in shared rooms, a fraction she used with the precision of someone who had measured it and knew exactly what it cost. She listened the way certain people listen, the kind that makes you feel she had already accounted for what you were going to say and was simply waiting for you to arrive at it. She was not unkind. She was efficient. There is a difference, and she knew it. She carried a spiral-bound notebook everywhere, floral cover, dark pink blooms on cream, slightly incongruous against her sharp blazers and the particular economy of her movements, and she wrote in it with a cramped, careful hand that suggested she took what she heard seriously. I had seen it on the corner of every conference table she had occupied for 18 months. I had never once asked what was in it. The Morrison Group pitch was booked for 2 o'clock on a Wednesday in Conference Room B. I had been preparing it for 6 weeks. 22 slides on operational restructuring, 2 appendices, and a financial model that had taken my colleague Raj 4 days to clean up to my standard, and 3 more to clean up to the client's. The kind of presentation that exists at the intersection of everything you know and everything the client is afraid to hear. The room smelled, when I went in at 1:30 to set up, of stale coffee and the particular chill of air conditioning running too cold for November. The projector hummed in the way projectors hum when they are working. That detail will matter. At 1:40, my laptop died, not a sleep mode, not a battery issue. The complete, immediate, no-warning kind of dead that it would later explain was a firmware conflict, at which point the explanation would be academic. I was standing at the front of Conference Room B with a dead screen, a charging cable that had become suddenly symbolic, and 18 minutes before the clients arrived. I went to the corridor. I tried Raj, no answer. I tried the IT helpline, 4 minutes on hold, and then a voice that asked me to describe the issue and log a ticket. I described the issue. I did not feel that a ticket was going to resolve the afternoon. Lena came around the corner from the east stairwell. She had her notebook under one arm and a coffee in her other hand, and the expression of someone who is between things and moving at her own pace. She saw my face. She stopped. "What happened?" I told her. 15 seconds. No waste. She set the coffee on the windowsill, deliberately, level, not a motion spilled, and opened her notebook to a page she located without looking for it. She had been there before, in her own head on this exact page. "How many slides in the intro section?" 4. "I know 2 of them. Tell me the other 2. Lena, 16 minutes. She had already torn out a page, the sound of it in the corridor. Clean and decisive. "Tell me the other 2. I told her. She wrote. Her handwriting was fast, exact, and completely legible under pressure, which is not how most people's handwriting behaves under pressure, and I noticed this in the specific way you notice things when adrenaline has narrowed your attention to a very fine point. She had the whiteboard up in conference room B by 1:52. I talked through the structure. She wrote the key arguments in a clear spatial layout that I would not have thought to use and that turned out to be the best decision in the room. Raj arrived at 1:58 with his own laptop and a look of controlled alarm, managed to pull one appendix from a shared drive with 40 seconds to spare, and we went in. The Morrison Group liked it. What they said afterward, specifically, was that it felt unusually dynamic, which is client language for we couldn't identify the mechanism, but the thing worked. It worked because 2 people who had spent 18 months competing had spent 6 minutes collaborating, and the combination was sharper than either of us had planned. Afterward, in the corridor, the clients gone, the adrenaline metabolizing into something quieter, I turned to Lena and started to thank her. She looked at me with the expression of someone who has already decided what comes next. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just take me to dinner." She picked up her notebook and her cold coffee and walked away. I stood in the corridor and watched her go and thought, well, there it is. My brain, to its credit, attempted to categorize what had just happened. Professional courtesy, a colleague helping in a crisis, the dinner a casual acknowledgement between people who had just survived something together. Reasonable, she was professional to her core, she would know the conventions. But she had walked away before I could respond, not the quick pivot she did in meetings when she was done with a thread. Something different. Something that wanted space between the sentence and whatever came next. I am, apparently, a person who notices the difference. I went back to my desk. The Morrison Group notes existed entirely in handwritten form now. Pages from Lena's notebook, her cramped, careful hand, covering my arguments in her own spatial logic. I stacked them neatly. I told myself I would return them tomorrow. I put them in my top drawer rather than the recycling bin, which I did not examine. I had poor survival instincts around women whose handwriting remained legible in a crisis. The next morning I was in at 7:30. The office at that hour is a different place. Coffee machine noise, morning light off the east windows. Nobody performing anything yet. I took the notebook pages out of my drawer and told myself I was simply reviewing them before returning them. That was plausible. I believed it for approximately 2 minutes. Her notes on my methodology were careful and engaged. The supply chain framing on slide 9 had a small line beside it. Strong angle. This can carry more weight. Push it. The section on the human cost of restructuring had an asterisk and a note in the margin. This is the real argument. The numbers should arrive after this, not before. Slide 14. The one I had always felt was the weakest. Structurally. Had a longer note. The sequencing is wrong. You're arriving at the conclusion before the audience is ready for it. Flip the middle. These were not the notes of someone looking for gaps. These were the notes of someone who had been reading the work seriously, not to find the angle to beat it, because they found it interesting. That is a different kind of attention, and it sat in my chest at 7:40 in the morning and declined to move. I thought about 18 months of briefings, Lena's pushback on my arguments, which had always been hard and specific, the kind that made the argument better and never let it stay lazy. I had been telling myself this was competition. I was now sitting with the possibility that it was something else in the same clothes. That is what hiding looks like when it has good instincts and better discipline. I returned the pages at 9:15. She was at her desk, reading, morning light on the left side of her face, the floral notebook open beside her keyboard. She looked up when I arrived at the door. "Your notes," I said. She looked at the pages in my hand. Something moved in her expression, small, quickly rearranged. "You read them," she said. "You tore them out of your notebook in front of me while writing in them." She considered this with the fairness she gave everything that deserved it. "That's a reasonable point." She took the pages. 14, she said. "I know," I said. "You were right." She looked at me. Something in the look was different from the professional version, longer than was technically necessary. Then she went back to her screen. I went back to my desk. I thought about the word margin. I thought about the asterisk on the human cost section. I thought about the fact that Lena Park had a page of handwritten notes on my presentations in her personal notebook, not a work file. Not a shared drive, but the floral-covered notebook she carried everywhere and wrote in when she was thinking seriously. I sat with this until noon, and then admitted to myself what it probably meant. 2 days later, I ran into Priya from the strategy team in the kitchen. She had heard about the Morrison Group situation. Word moves fast in small offices, and we talked about it briefly. Then, as she was leaving with her coffee, she mentioned that Lena had rescheduled her own Hartley Group preparation meeting to help me on Wednesday. I had not known she'd had a meeting. I had not asked. Hartley were annoyed, Priya said, at the door. "They don't reschedule for anything. She didn't say anything," I said. Priya gave me the look of a person who is choosing not to explain something she thinks should already be obvious. Then she left. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. The coffee machine finished its cycle. Outside the window, the city was doing what it does at 11 in the morning. Unremarkable and continuous. Everyone moving with purpose in the way that makes you feel slightly still. I thought about the page she had torn out. The sound of it. The speed. She had not asked whether I needed help. She had simply looked at my face, read it, and started solving. In 18 months of professional rivalry, I had watched her think carefully about every move she made. I had never once seen her skip the thinking. She had skipped the thinking. I thought about what that cost, from someone built the way she was. I thought about the Hartley meeting she had rescheduled without mentioning it, and the Morrison Group notes she had kept in a personal notebook instead of a work file, and the February briefing where a page of her handwriting had ended up in my top drawer, where I still, 3 days later, had not found a reason to move it. I thought about someone ripping a page from their notebook without calculating the cost. I thought about the fact that Lena Park, who calculated everything, had done exactly that. We ended up in the lift on Friday afternoon. I had not planned it. The universe, apparently, had. She was looking at her phone. I was looking at the floor. The doors closed, and the lift made its slow institutional ascent, and we stood in the particular silence of two people who are both very aware the other person is there. She spoke first. "Hartley rescheduled," she said. "Better slot, actually. It worked out." "I'm glad," I said. I'm sorry it cost you the day. It didn't cost me anything, I minded. She was still looking at her phone, but her thumb wasn't moving. I looked at her. The lift was either very slow or time had done something unusual with the afternoon. Lena, I said. She looked up. The notebook, I said. The notes on my presentations. How long have you been taking them? A pause. Since the Caldwell briefing, she said. February was 14 months ago. I started. Longer than is professionally reasonable, she said. I know. I said that to myself several times. A small pause. It didn't help. The lift opened. She stepped out and turned back, and for one moment she was in the corridor and I was still inside, doors open between us. The dinner offer stands, she said, evenly, watching me. The doors began to close. I put my hand in the gap. Saturday, I said. She looked at me. Something in her expression settled, not surprise. The thing that happens when something you've been waiting for finally arrives, and you weren't sure, until this moment, that it would. Saturday, she said. The restaurant was small and warm and specific, the kind of place that suggests the person who chose it actually thought about it. A room with low light and the particular sound of other people's good evenings running underneath your own. She was there before me, which I had expected. She had the floral notebook on the table beside her water glass, which I had also expected, and she closed it when I sat down, which landed somewhere between deliberate and instinctive. She looked at me across the table, the way she occasionally looked at me across conference tables, the full version of the look, the one she usually allowed only in pieces. You read the notes, she said. An opening, not an accusation. I did. Then you know I wasn't just tracking your work to stay ahead of it. I know. What were you doing? She considered the question with the honesty she gave things that deserved it. Learning it, she said. The way you frame the human argument before the financial one, I do that in theory. You do it instinctively, the way someone does when they actually believe it. She looked at the table. I started taking notes because it was useful. I kept taking them because I couldn't stop being interested. She looked up. In the work, she said. And? I said. A pause. Long enough that I heard the table next to us laugh at something, and the person doing it, she said quietly. Eventually, she said it without flinching. She held my gaze afterward, which took something. I looked at her. The floral notebook closed on the table, her hands on the tablecloth, the room warm around her. And I said, you don't have to say more than that. We can have dinner and this can just be dinner. She looked at me steadily. Is that what you want? No, I said. She went still. Then, quietly. Good. I said, I've taken 3 different routes past your building this month. None of them are shorter. I've been telling myself it was the traffic. She looked at me. A small thing shifted at the corner of her mouth. It's never the traffic on Mercer Lane. I know. I checked, she said. 3 months ago. When I started noticing you were, she stopped. That is more than I meant to say. I'm glad you said it. She looked at the notebook. Then, at me. Something in her face made its adjustment, not the professional shift, not the rearrangement she did when she was composing herself back into order. The other kind. The kind that happens when you've finished composing. You came to my office to return the pages, she said. And you told me I was right about the sequencing. Not as a courtesy. She looked at her hands. No one tells me I was right without needing something in exchange. You just said it. You were right, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. It's still not why I noticed. I held her gaze. Neither of us said anything for a moment. The restaurant went on around us, low voices from other tables, the particular warmth of a room that has found its right temperature for the evening. And neither of us was in it, not really. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers, slowly, no surprises, the kind of gesture that is a question before it is anything else. She looked down at it. Then she turned her hand over underneath mine and held it, and the movement was so deliberate it could only have been a decision. "For the record," she said, her voice doing careful work to stay level, "I was also going to be excellent at that client pitch." "You would have been," I said. "Better than me, probably, almost certainly." She almost smiled. "Don't tell anyone I said that." "I won't," I said. "Don't tell anyone I said you were right about the sequencing." She looked at me. The real laugh arrived, rough-edged, unhurried, nothing like the version she kept ready for rooms where people were watching. I had never heard it before that moment. I found, immediately, that I wanted to hear it again as often as possible, which told me something I should have worked out months ago. 3 months later, the floral notebook was on my kitchen table on a Wednesday morning, which meant Lena had left it when she went to the gym at 6. There was a sticky note on the cover that said, "Kellner pitch. Slide 9, push the supply chain harder." I had been working on the Kellner Group deck the night before. She had read 3 slides over my shoulder without commenting, gone to sleep, and apparently had thoughts about it that she was saving for the morning. This was, I was learning, how she operated in spaces she had decided to occupy. She didn't announce herself. She simply became part of the architecture. I pushed slide 9 harder. The pitch won the account. A year after that, she was promoted to lead analyst. She got the office with the window and the meeting invitations that actually mattered. I had been making the case for it with Graham for 4 months, quietly, the way you make cases for things when you know the person you are making them for would reject the help if they knew about it. She found out eventually, Priya told her, because Priya has a limited tolerance for information that deserves to exist, and she called it unnecessary and deeply noted, which was Lena for, "I am moved by this and am not going to say so directly." I was learning her. It took time. I did not mind. Years later, when people asked how it started, and they did ask, because the industry is small and office stories travel, she told it one way and I told it another. Her version started with the presentation. Mine started 14 months before that, in a February briefing, when I glanced across the conference table and caught her writing in a floral notebook and felt, for reasons I couldn't have named, that I already knew the shape of whatever was in it. I hadn't had an explanation for that then. I had a much better one now. Nothing important had arrived suddenly. It had simply stopped being filed under the wrong category.